All right, Alexander, let's do a video before the final vote takes place in the elections in Turkey. I expect Erdogan to win. I mean, he's one point to half a point away from the 50% threshold. I can't imagine him not being able to get over the finish line, and I think that his victory has been, I don't want to say guaranteed, but the party that was in third place that had something like 5 or 6% of the vote. I forgot the name of the person, not the party, the person that got the 6% and was in third place during the first round of the vote. But anyway, he has come out and supported Erdogan as well, and I think this was to be expected because this was a conservative nationalist candidate and party behind the candidate. I forget that once again. I forget the name, but it pretty much means that Erdogan will easily get over the 50% threshold that he needs in the second round.
I have to agree. I mean, I can't pronounce the man's name correctly, but it reads like Sinan Erdogan, but I mean, I'm not going to say that this is the correct pronunciation. And apologies to all people from Turkey. I really very much struggle pronouncing Turkish names. I try. I never seem to be able to get them right. And my big
you're right. Sinan Ogan, Ogan, endorses Erdogan.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So I agree. I mean, I would have thought that. I mean, Erdogan went into came out of the first round with 49.5% of the vote. He only needs 0.5% to win. Erdogan got 5% plus. I would have thought that's more than enough. Even if some of those people don't vote for Erdogan, but I would have thought that's more than enough now for Erdogan to win and to win comfortably in the second round. So I think it would be a major shock if the vote went the other way. I mean, if it does go the other way, all I would say is that I'd be not just surprised, but a little bit concerned about the fact that the votes switched in that kind of fashion. I mean, I can't believe that all of this 5% people who voted for Erdogan, who, as you correctly said, are conservative nationalists, ideologically much closer to Erdogan, would suddenly turn round and disregard what Erdogan is saying and go off and vote for the more left-wing, pro-Western candidate. I mean, it doesn't make any kind of sense to me. And I mean, it would be an enormous upset if it happened. The one thing I will say is that there's been a massive attack on the Lira, the Turkish currency, over the last couple of days, weeks. Obviously, it's the place, the point where Erdogan is at his most vulnerable. I mean, Turkey has gone through very high inflation. The currency has, had yo-yoed up and down. And I have to also say, I can understand why people might feel that the Lira isn't going anywhere well. That there might be good reasons why the markets are unhappy with the Lira, but the state of the Lira. But I would still think that an attack on this scale is something that has clearly been orchestrated to some extent, perhaps to try to put pressure on the Turkish electorate to turn against Erdogan before the runoff. I think that was probably organised, by the way, before the election, in case there was a runoff. But anyway, there we are. I don't think it will be enough. I think by now the Turkish electorate is hardened against these currency fluctuations and these inflation surges. Everything points to me towards an Erdogan win.
The people in Turkey understand. Do you believe they understand what's going on with, let's say, the manipulation in the Lira or anything else that's being manipulated in order to orchestrate a defeat for Erdogan? I mean, once again, the collective West the European Union, the United States, NGOs like what John Bolton has. I mean, they've come out and said it openly. They want Erdogan out. I mean, the New York Times has written about it. The Economist has written about it. The Washington Post. I mean, they don't hide it at all. They want Erdogan
Yes.
gone, and they'll do everything they can
Yes.
to move him out. So I imagine the voters understand this as well.
Yeah.
This is not being hidden from
No,
them.
I've no doubt they do. And by the way, this is again an example of how the West gets it wrong now, because of course you have in Turkey an electorate now that's become increasingly educated and increasingly sophisticated, and of course they read the media and they follow what's going on, and they're very well aware about all these statements that have been made in the West, and Erdogan's campaign has pushed the business of the cover of The Economist, Erdogan must go, heavily. And of course, that's provoked an anti-Western backlash in Turkey, as you might expect it would. And I think that Western leaders, again, underestimate the sophistication of the publics in these countries. They don't fully understand that these games that they play, especially when they brag about them, are now becoming too transparent and too visible to be successful. And instead of keeping silent, which is what they should have done, pretended that they weren't interfering in the Turkish election, saying that they didn't have any particular horse in this particular race, we would all have known that that wasn't the case, but it wouldn't have been so blatant and obvious as it's been. And instead of doing that, they couldn't restrain themselves. They published all these articles, Erdogan must go, and the result is that it looks overwhelmingly likely that they're going to get Erdogan again.
Yeah, I wonder why they can't restrain themselves anymore. I wonder why they have to openly admit it now. In the past, they would not admit it. They would do their best to cover it up and hide it. But now they have to announce it now. I mean, they just can't help it.
Well, I think if I have to say this, it's partly because of the declining quality of Western leadership, and at some level, these people know it themselves. So they have to pretend to themselves that they're, the masters of the universe, the cleverest people on earth. So whereas in the old days, in the 50s and 60s, the US in those days, or at least the officials who carried out these things, knew how to keep silent because they were tough-minded professionals, and they knew that if you organise an election in that kind of way, you needed to keep silent about it, but they were more focused on the outcome. This time, they have to show and reassure each other about how clever they are, and that means that they talk about it at inordinate and incredible length. I mean, you see this all the time. You see this you saw that with the Nord Stream attacks, that, you have, we didn't have anything to do with it, ha, 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 type sort of reactions that happened after it happened. I mean, instead of, saying as little about it as possible, or even condemning it, which might have been the really clever thing to do, they essentially made it fairly clear that they were involved.
Yeah.
It's what impunity, stupidity, and entitlement, a sense of entitlement does to you.
Yeah. All right, let's wrap up the video with, I guess, a final question, which is Erdogan's statements that if he wins, he will not impose sanctions on Russia. He's been very clear about that. He'll keep his policy as is. He'll keep the same policy that he's been taking with regards to the conflict in Ukraine. And from what I understand, they will work on Syria, on resolving the involvement in Syria, rapprochement with Assad, and all of these things. So, what do you
Yes.
make of that?
No, I think this is exactly what Erdogan wants to do, and I think on the Syrian issue, I mean, he has to settle it. I mean, one of the things where the opposition was able to make mileage was because they seemed to be more keen on settling the Syrian conflict than even Erdogan was. And of course, for many people in Turkey, one of the big issues is the return of the Syrian refugees. They're a big economic burden on Turkey. And vast numbers of outsiders in a country, as we know from our own experiences in Europe, are a burden on that country, or at least are perceived to be so by the people of that country. So the Turkish public wants to see the war in Syria end. They want to see the refugees return. They want to see peace on Turkey's southern border. And many people in Turkey now, including many influential people, also want the relationship with Russia to be preserved because it has worked economically well for Turkey. So I don't think there's any reason to doubt that Erdogan will continue with these policies. In fact, more likely than not, he will intensify them. And with the Syrian thing, I think he will move as fast as he can to have some kind of a deal done. And there's talk now that there's a tripartite summit. Cavusoglu, the Turkish foreign minister, talked about a tripartite summit. Putin, Erdogan and Assad all coming together, agreeing the peace in Syria. And I think this is very much on the cards. Personally, I wouldn't be surprised if Raisi from Iran was also there. But it may be that Erdogan wants it just to be himself and Assad and Putin.
All right, that would be a big diplomatic win if that's one of the first things that Erdogan achieves if he's reelected. Okay, yeah, theduran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, Rockfin, Odyssey, BitChute, and Telegram. And go to the Duran shop, 10% off. Use the code GOODDAY. Take care.